Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Matt.
One of the rare times I'm actually in a good mood when we're talking today. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, your moods can confuse me. You just got blitzed by Media Matters. Maybe that's why you're in a good mood when you're in Media Matters crosshairs. That puts the spring in your step.
Well, I think it helps, and I have to be honest. They could have taken some. They could have framed that piece in a way that was unfair. I think they accurately described what happened, as far as I know. So kudos to them. I thought they would just try to misrepresent my position. Now, this was just for people who don't know. I was on CNN talking about the Weinstein story, and I made this dangerous move, which is to sort of go into a little bit of an esoteric discussion that wasn't exactly about Weinstein, but was sort of related to it. And I think there's a danger in doing that too soon. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like when Donald Trump, after Charlottesville, remember when he said there were bad people on both sides? Well, you could have actually made a pretty compelling argument to that case in a think piece a week or two later. But in the wake of somebody being killed in Charlottesville, and with the images of white supremacists, it's maybe not good timing to sort of make that contrarian take. And so I kind of did that, and they kind of called me on it. I don't know if the people on my panel understood the point I was making, which is the problem. And it makes me wonder if I communicated myself.
So I was looking at the transcript, and the best part of the transcript is Jeffrey Toobin's comment in between.
Yes, it was funny because I started off by saying I probably shouldn't say this,
right?
But I'm gonna, and then I say no. I think we could all agree that rape is bad, and groping is bad, and quid pro quos are bad. And then he's like, "I'm sensing a butt coming,"
and you're gonna regret saying it.
And you're gonna regret it, and I probably did. He has a voice of wisdom there.
So I'm looking at your transcript. So you're saying Harvey Weinstein's accused of rape. That's obviously a black and white issue. Groping is obviously wrong. Threatening, quid pro quo. If you don't do this, I'm going to fire you. Yeah. Those are obviously criminal and evil things to do. However, so he denies any unwanted sexual contact, at least for now. So should we say that? So we should say that. But I guess my question is, what are the rules? Because if you are a powerful man, if you are a boss, and he called these women, by the way, colleagues, I don't know if they are colleagues or subordinates, but what are the there's a little bit more. Well, let me tell you what I'm getting at. If you are a powerful man in this country, you're if you're a celebrity or whatever, let's say you're not married, are you allowed to hit on younger women? So there's a gray area in your perspective. You tickle all things that are not gray areas. It's a gray area to you.
This somehow became me, to some of the people on my panel, this somehow became me defending Weinstein.
Because why? That's
the problem with TV. That is the problem with TV. And again, maybe it might have been too soon. Maybe it's too soon.
That's why I don't get about your point. So and let me just admit, I don't agree with your point in any context.
Okay,
but
that's a good disclaimer. In general, that's a good disclaimer for you to have.
But if you're gonna have a debate on workplace romance,
yes,
is any kind of workplace romance out of bounds?
Well,
why would you incorporate that debate into the Weinstein debate, which is clearly not about that? It's all about these obviously black and white areas.
Well, I have to go back. One thing that's not included in that transcript is the question that Anderson Cooper asked right before, and he said something. I have to go back and look. I don't remember. He said something that I felt opened the door to this larger discussion. And if you read the Weinstein story, there were plenty of examples. Now, yesterday, of course, there was the tape that emerged of him very clearly harassing a woman. But there were other examples of him, if you read about this, where there would be a young lady who was like a temp receptionist working at his production company. And he would ask her out for coffee. And she felt that this was a little weird or she felt uncomfortable about this, but he did it anyway. Now, look, I think that makes him a cad. It certainly doesn't like make him a good person. But in terms of like illegality or sort of crossing that line, I just think it's interesting. And I guess the problem is that this is a discussion that very well probably could or should be divorced from the Weinstein case. I think it's an interesting question. If you are a let's say you're a boss at a company, or you're not even the boss. Let's say you're not even the boss, right? But because he called it. So it's not clear to me whether some of these actresses, they didn't technically work for Weinstein, okay? In the sense that he called them colleagues. That's probably not a fair depiction, but they're also not necessarily subordinates of his. It's a different sort of arrangement. Is it, we talk about things like, I'm trying to think of some more examples here of people who have, Bill Cosby's a different example, obviously, because he allegedly like drugged and raped women. But let's say that take that part out of it. That's hard to do. But if you're Bill Cosby, you have this power, you have this charisma, you have this celebrity. Could you be dating aspiring actresses or asking them out? Like, is that wrong?
Well,
to do?
And
I'm raising this as let me just finish real quick. I'm raising it as a theoretical question because I do think that it used to be that doctors would date and marry nurses, and lawyers would date and marry researchers or whatever, right? Clerks. And now that doesn't happen so much. What happens is doctors date and marry doctors, and lawyers date and marry lawyers. And one of the consequences of this, one of the sort of unintended consequences of this, is a lack of social mobility and more income inequality. I mean, it used to be that, that somebody, kind of a middle class person, could marry up. That might sound patriarchal, but that's actually just the way it was. And I suppose it could even happen where a man is the nurse and marries a female doctor. Like, it doesn't matter to me. But my point now is, I just found this interesting, but kind of one of the challenges on TV, I think, is it's not like the DMZ bill where it's hard to engage in a albeit risky and dangerous thought exercise about these kind of discussions.
Yeah, I mean, it's the entire pundit panel format is not designed to allow for nuance. It's designed for smash mouth, left-right debate. But as a seasoned veteran of those panels, I assume that entering into that discussion, especially when the case at hand is not, I mean, maybe one story out of the 50 in a vacuum might seem relatively innocuous, but in the context of everything else that came out, there's a clear pattern of behavior. Maybe if you're prosecuting his cases, maybe you wouldn't be found guilty on every last one of them, but sure looks like you'd be guilty on some of them, or at least they'd be prosecutable. So, I mean, to me, the bigger, I feel like there's a tendency to go off into side stories. We spent 24 hours on, when's Hillary going to denounce Weinstein? Oh my goodness, now she'll never be president.
Right.
It took her 48 hours to do it.
Okay. I think that this was a risky thing for me to bring up, because, as you said, nuance. It's tough on TV. I'm actually lucky that I got out all my points. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could have been cut off very quickly, and then it's like Matt Lewis is defending Weinstein, which is obviously not the case. But I think it was like a risky and probably ill-advised thing for me to do. I think that's actually unfortunate. And yes, I could have very easily just done the sort of hackneyed, trite, why did it take Hillary Clinton? That could have been my tack. I could have gone there. I just thought that was boring and had been done before. People have been talking, number one, we're on day 6 of this story. And I know, yesterday, Ronan Farrow had, some new revelations. So it's still an ongoing story, but the story is also 5 or 6 days old. And the part about scoring political points, which I'm all for, but it's just boring to do constantly. I couldn't resist this temptation to bring up what I actually believe is I think that there are a lot of dudes out there, particularly older guys, probably over the age of 50, let's say, who they're like, what are the rules now? Like, why did I get to be successful and prominent if I couldn't hit on, people like maybe that don't work for me, but who are impressed by what I do at least. Like, that's the whole reason I went to, I'm paraphrasing them. Like, that's why we do all these push-ups. You know what I'm saying?
Well, again,
like,
there's a difference in using your status to impress women outside of the workplace than using your position to pressure and intimidate women inside the workplace.
I could not agree more. I think you're absolutely right, but I think that I think we may be getting to a point where, and again, there's no defense of anything why would I defend a guy who's like a donor to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama? Right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, if I was a partisan hack, I wouldn't even be, but I do think that we are sort of getting to a point where, like, it's going to be hard to that line of, like, when when you are somebody in a powerful position. Bill Clinton comes to mind. Like, is it wrong to use that power, that prestige or whatever, to impress women, even if they don't work for you? Like, if you run a production company, I've never really worked in Hollywood, but there very well could be people who don't work for you, but they may be they may actually be a little intimidated by you in some ways.
Well,
right?
I mean, if you're living in an industry town, even if someone's not directly working for you today, it's someone who could potentially work for you tomorrow. And if you are using your the power you have in the industry to pressure, intimidate, threaten, you'll never work in this town again, which apparently he actually said stuff like that. That's very bad.
No, I completely agree with you on that. But I'm not talking about pressuring, intimidating. Well, I did say intimidate earlier, but I'm not. What I'm getting at is, someone who basically. Here's a common example. Here's something that I'm sure happens all the time, right? So you're a dude who works in the book industry or journalism or Hollywood or whatever. You take a young intern, whatever, lady under your wing, and wow, and I think Weinstein did this sort of thing. And then at some point, you put the moves on her. I don't.
That's bad.
Okay, I.
That's wrong.
I think but is it? Okay, Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich was a Speaker of the House, who is now married to a woman, who was a congressional staffer, a young congressional staffer, and they've now been married for decades, I believe, or at least a decade, and she's now the ambassador to the Vatican.
Well, I mean,
was he sexually harassing her?
These are at least the more complicated examples where the relationship works out,
right?
But even in that example, he is creating a workplace situation where other staffers are not getting the same abilities to move up in the workplace, or at least the perception thereof.
She didn't work for him. She did not work for him.
Well, she didn't work for him. That's another story.
No, she didn't work for him, but he is the Speaker of the House. He's like a rock star at this point. She's a young, maybe ambitious, maybe impressionable, it's unclear, staffer on some governmental committee. He's quite a bit older than her, more worldly.
And he was cheating on his wife, which is in and of itself.
That's a whole other. We won't even get into that because that's.
But if he's dating somebody who works for somebody else, And there is nothing about, I mean, he is not saying to her, I'm going to help you in your career if you go to bed with me. It's just dating. Then that's okay.
You don't think that's predatory behavior in some way when you're like a 50-year-old dude?
Well, she's a consenting adult. So I'm not going to, I wouldn't say that. Now, in the Bill Clinton case, technically, Monica Lewinsky was a consenting adult. She was of age,
right.
but she was an intern. She was a subordinate of his. So by definition, that is workplace harassment because no matter how consensual that was, and by all accounts that was consensual, it's still creating an environment where other people who work for Clinton weren't getting the same kind of advantages.
Yeah. Or I obviously agree with you about Bill Clinton being a horrible person
because
doing a horrible thing.
Because you are a partisan hack.
But I do question the Newt Gingrich thing. I'm serious.
Well,
and I think it's debatable.
I'm on the opposite side. Wait, are you saying that Gingrich was wrong? Infidelity aside.
I'm saying this is probably where I should have gone last night, but it's such a weird departure. It's probably not appropriate for anyway. I wonder, is it, you take the fact that he was married out of it, right? Because that's obviously a problem. But if you are the Speaker of the House, and you're 50 years old or whatever, and there is this young, over 21, but young, impressionable congressional staffer, and you start asking her out, flirting with her, they ended up falling in love and getting married, and she's now the ambassador to the Vatican. But, I think they're, I'm not sure it's a critical, is that not sort of predatory behavior? Or, are we cool with that? I don't, that's the question. My point is, and I know I've opened up this weird debate that, nobody else in the world is thinking of, and it's maybe apropos of nothing or very little. But I do wonder, are we going to get to the point where what Newt did is viewed as crossing the line, and that he's some sort of a predator? I'm using him as an example.
I don't think so, but I think this is all it's getting very far away from the Weinstein situation, and I think the bigger story with Weinstein. I mean, we're sort of in this mode where now we're trying to figure out who knew what when, who else should be punished in the court of public opinion, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, that sort of thing. But to my mind, the bigger potential story is how prevalent is this behavior in Hollywood and other industries? Because I don't think it is a large jump to make that Weinstein is some sort of anomaly. As I don't think Bill Cosby is some sort of anomaly. There clearly is a culture of this behavior. It's certainly not every single man who's in a position of power, but it's not a handful either. And it would be useful to society, I think, to find more people that did this, get those stories out in the public, so there is a social deterrent for it to not keep happening. So I mean, right now, after what happened to Bill Clinton, you might think throughout the whole political world, people would stop having extramarital affairs.
Here's what happened to Bill Clinton. He's wildly popular. Yes, he was impeached, but it didn't really matter. So nothing happened to Bill Clinton. And Donald Trump, who said at least some horrible things,
right,
got elected president.
Well, that's right.
That's
right. So we have very selective targets of outrage. I'm not going to name names and smear people on here, but there are other celebrities who have been accused of some very bad things, who are still treated like heroes, who have not gone through what Bill Cosby has gone through. I'm not saying Bill Cosby hasn't deserved everything.
Woody Allen, Roman Polanski. I'll name names. Who else? Who else you got?
I'm not going to. I'm not going to choose names. But
most of them. The interesting thing to me is, and I'll be the partisan hack here, is that usually the liberals get a pass on this. They don't. Weinstein is very interesting because he is a big time liberal and donor, and it finally caught up to him. But Hugh Hefner, I mean, I'm not saying that he was a sexual harasser, but certainly, not a great dude, but pretty celebrated mostly by liberals over the years. I know there were some,
but there's a huge push on the left to clean house here. I mean, and it's not to say that every single person. I mean, there are other examples of people on the left that have done horrible things.
Roger Ailes got away with this stuff. Roger Ailes got away with this stuff for years, obviously, too. And this reminds me of the Ailes thing, because remember with Roger Ailes, it was just who was the original lady who came out and accused him? The Fox and Friends.
Gretchen Carlson.
Gretchen Carlson. And then after that, you had just a deluge of people, including like Megyn Kelly, even, I believe, said that he had made some inappropriate advances toward her. And the same thing with Weinstein, right? It starts off with like Rose McGowan and Ashley Judd, and then the next thing you know, you've got Angelina Jolie talking about it.
But we still have a tendency to, I think, be narrow about this and not not continue the investigation, exploration across. I mean, maybe it's just people have to come out and tell their stories, and that's a hard thing to do. But between, I mean, you're doing this a little bit as far as taking the conversation to other workplace situations. You've seen Eric Erickson talk about, hey, maybe Mike Pence's rules are a healthy thing, and Josh Barro had a Twitter storm sort of along those lines. And
that's a good point, Bill. I was trying to have to expand the discussion,
right. but I think where it's expanding into how can we have structures to insulate men from hurting themselves and others. Let's treat them like inherent ogres that need to be contained, and create social structures where we don't put them in situations where they can't control their behavior. And what I would like to see is let's get all of the perpetrators here. Let's catch as many as we can, and so it gets embedded in society that just don't do that. Men don't do that anymore. When boys that are growing up should see this is not behavior to idolize. This is behavior to be repulsed and disgusted by. So the next generation, this doesn't happen anymore.
Look, I would completely agree with you that we need to find these people and expose them, and that yes, I think that there could be, just like in crime, that there could be a deterrent, right? Like if you think that you're going to get the death penalty, maybe you'll think twice before murdering somebody else. But I think that just like as is the case with crime,
you'll never get to zero, obviously. But
no, that's not. You're right, but that's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say is that that the deterrence, the threat of punishment, of getting caught, I don't think is all there is. I think that there is some very deep-seated sicknesses in a lot of people, and some of this I think is the product of a fallen man. And I think that if I'm with Eric Erickson on the Mike Pence thing, like I think that, and I get the argument. Because I can tell you personally, my wife, who she works for political candidates, helping them raise money, and there have been people who don't want to say like meet with her privately or something, and that could pose a potential problem for her, in terms of she's not having access to the candidate. I think I asked her about it when this controversy came out, and she said that it hasn't been a big deal. It hasn't impacted her very much at all, even sort of working in the conservative movement. But my take is, if you realize that you have weaknesses, and like for some people, it's maybe a little bit too much lasagna. For other people, they like to take a nip of the sauce. And for other people, they actually have this like unhealthy lust, and I think saying like control it, this is wrong, is like telling the crack addict, like, hey man, this is not help. You need to really like. I guess my point is, I think this is a very, very a strong drive that some people have. It's been plaguing mankind since day one, and if Mike Pence or whomever wants to have these systems in place to lessen the likelihood of either them doing something stupid or being accused of impropriety, I'm all for it. I say go for it.
I'm going to give you the last word on that because I have to jump in about 5, and I want to get to one other quick topic.
I'm just going to filibuster then. Now I know my strategy.
All right. I want to get your take on what Bannon is up to before we go, because he has said he wants to primary everybody except for Ted Cruz. There's already talk he's recruiting Eric Prince, the current or former head of Blackwater, the private military company, to run in Wyoming against John Barrasso. I mean, John Barrasso, you're going to pick the top 5 most conservative people in the Senate. Barrasso would be on it. Wyoming's one of the most conservative states. There's not a single vote he's ever taken. It's not a party line vote. But just the mere existence of being in Washington and having been at a lunch with Mitch McConnell is now enough to make you a target for a primary challenge, and Prince is someone who has to establish residency in the state, for Pete's sake. So there's this sense that nobody is safe in D.C. right now, and I saw Bill Kristol tweeted out that you understand this is a deliberate attempt to destroy the Republican Party as it stands. So I guess what I want to ask you, do you think this is this truly is a mortal threat to the Republican Party in the long run? And in the short run, how does the Senate do basic things like keep the government open if taking a vote that's a compromise created by McConnell to have the government function is going to make you a mark?
Yeah, I mean, they do. Look, I think you brought this up last week, Bill. Not passing tax reform. I think we should pass tax reform, but not passing it's not going to ruin us. Not doing infrastructure. That's not going to ruin us. But not, raising the debt ceiling or what. No, that's an issue that we could have dire consequences, right? So there are some very important things that they have to do in the Senate. Yeah, I think that Bannon is, he's not an institutionalist. He's an insurrectionist. He's a revolutionary. I think he sees. I've never been able to use this line. It's so weird, but do you remember in the movie Die Hard? In the movie Die Hard, when they're trying to break Hans Gruber, they're trying to break into the safe, and the LAPD, the first, or maybe it's the FBI, the first thing they always do in a terrorist situation is cut the power, which is exactly what Hans Gruber wants to do. Mm-hmm. And Bruce Willis is can't you see, this is you're doing exactly. This isn't this isn't a bug. It's a feature. And I feel like it's kind of the same type situation. Bannon, sort of burning down the house isn't just something he might have to do. It's exactly what he's trying to do. That's precisely what he's trying to do.
It's a slight digression. I've been reading about. I just finished up Martin Van Buren in my presidential reading. I'm now on to Harrison and Tyler, and so right around that time, the 1840 time, this when the Democratic Party split into a couple factions, and one of them was the barn burner faction. This is what I believe. This was when the name came into a political usage, because there was a Dutch, I think it came out of the New York Democratic Party split. And there was a big Dutch community in New York. Van Buren was Dutch, and there was a Dutch tale about the farmer that burned down his barn to get rid of the rats. And so the more radical faction of the party, they were called barn burners. So now
that's interesting. I didn't know where that came from.
And so now you're seeing this happening before our eyes. We have a lot of division happening on the left right now, which I don't think it's as prominent as what's happening on the right. We've talked about, I think we've talked about Joe Biden, challenging Bernie as of late. I think there's things that have happened the past week where Biden actually explicitly took a swipe at Bernie in his speech in Alabama the other day, and Bernie's Senate newsletter to swipe back, and so I mean that's sort of churning on the left. But you have this very overt circular firing squad happening where Bannon's going out against the whole party. Bob Corker is now lashing out at Trump and sort of warning the world that every day in the White House is utter chaos, where people are desperately trying to maintain sanity and keep Trump from going off the edge. It's hard to say which side's division is more internally damaging, but it does feel like we're in this place where neither party is in a very settled place, and there are forces within both parties looking to alter its basic ideological direction.
Yes, and of course, one of the interesting things is that Ted Cruz, the guy who I forget what he said about Trump, he called him a maniac or something, I can't remember, and refused to endorse him at the convention. Ted Cruz is the one guy who's safe, who will not be challenged by the Mercers and Steve Bannon. So we do live in interesting times. But he, as you said, nobody's safe. He is the one guy who's safe, at least from Bannon. But he may have other primary challenges, and of course he has a general election challenge. So.
Well, I gotta leave it there. I know it's a bit of a short show, but
I'd love to blame you for this, but this show would have been longer if I had started on time. I was late to start, so
that's all right. We'll the DMZ fans will forgive you, and I don't know if they'll forgive your comments on the show today, but they'll forgive you for your lack of punctuality.
Now I'm feeling bad that I wasted all that time on that weird story. So, all right, tune in next week, and we'll have a normal DMZ show. That's not bizarre.
So catch it on bloggingheads.tv, on iTunes, on other places where great podcasts are sold. Where else anything you got to plug before we go?
Read me at The Daily Beast. Listen to me at Matt Lewis in the News on iTunes, and follow us at DMZ Show on Twitter.
All right. Till next week. Take care.
See you guys.